Hey, what's up guys, I'm Crazy Zot and I've spent well over 12,000 hours using Blender and making art with it. The works on your screen were all made by me, and I'm also the developer of multiple plugins used by thousands of people, both hobbyists and in the industry. And I've also taught thousands of people how to use Blender. And in this video, I'm going to tell you a bunch of tips that I wish I knew when I was first starting out. So without further ado, let's get into it. So tip number one is don't wait to start making what you actually want to make. So a lot of people give advice, like if you want to make characters or environments, you should start with making something like really simple. And overall, I disagree with this. Like for characters, for example, they'll say, if you want to make like a human, you should start off by making like an ogre or a monster or something simple like that to start off with. And I just don't agree with it personally. And the reason why is because if you don't enjoy what you're making and you're not interested in it, then it's going to be harder for you to improve. But, you know, if you make something right off the bat that you are interested in, what you're making might be a little bit harder, but overall you'll enjoy it more. And so it kind of like cancels out. And if anything, it's even better because when you enjoy something, it's going to make it easier for you to become like really good at that, right? Because you actually enjoy what you're making. So my next tip is to start with the fundamentals of simple modeling and kind of get used to the UI of Blender. That's the most important thing when you're starting out, because once you're comfortable with the UI, the 3D view kind of becomes more like a canvas, like in a painting or something like that. And you know, you're going to be a lot more comfortable and you won't be freaking out about like hitting the wrong button and stuff like that. And I actually made a complete beginner's tutorial on this channel, so you can just check that out. It goes over the UI, modeling fundamentals, and even like common modeling issues. So you should definitely check that out, as in 3D, you know, like being able to navigate the viewport and model well is one of the first things you should look into. Tip number 3, don't view failures as failures. They're kind of just like steps to becoming good. As an example, check out this old animation I did. It was really just like a weird attempt at making some type of water. And while this didn't turn out good, it was from making stuff in the past like this that gradually gave me more experience and ultimately in the future led me to be able to make stuff like this, for example. So basically those mistakes from the past that I made helped me inform my future decisions, and because you know the way learning works in the brain is every time you make something, you gain some new insight from that you can then use in the future pretty much. So if you make something and it doesn't turn out well, it's actually not a waste of time. It's not a failure. It's just a lesson that is going to basically benefit you in the future. So if anything, you should try and shift your mindset so that you can look at it in a positive way. And one other thing on this that I want to talk about is that oftentimes great art requires a degree of risk. So what I mean by that is basically, if you want to make something that's like really unique and insane, oftentimes you're going to have to push the boundaries creatively. By that I mean you might have to do like a more crazy animation, more crazy camera movement, more of like a interesting type of design. And so taking these risks will not only help you improve because you're pushing your skill to the limits, but it's also going to enable you to kind of make more interesting stuff, if that makes sense. And oftentimes these risks can result in failure, but you know, as I just said, they can lead to future growth. So tip number 4 is that shaders are not a magical thing that make your art look good, but they're kind of just like a powerful tool. So one of my biggest pet peeves that gets me a lot of times is when I see comments and messages of people saying like, bro, I want to have your shader. Oh, the shader is so good, like, but that doesn't make any sense, and they're kind of like treating it as if the shaders will make them a pro overnight, which isn't true. Shaders are just a tool, and let me show you something. So let's say we have a character I made here. Now look at this. Here's the character with the same shader, but I just like changed a bunch of parameters, and it looks like crap now. Why? Because what makes it look good is actually how I placed my values on the zones of the face and all that stuff. Now don't get me wrong, knowing how to efficiently use the shader editor made it easier to make this, and you know, it's just like a really powerful tool, but it's not something that's going to magically make your art good. They're just an artistic tool that lets you customize things a lot easier. That's all it is. Tip number 5 is to embrace the ugly phase and push through it. So the ugly phase is something that happens to everyone, whether you're a beginner or more experienced. It's something that happens in, you know, like the first stages of the art that you're making. Let me show you, for example, when I was making this piece, it looked like this in its initial stages, but then by the end it looked like this. Check here too, with this character, started like this and ended like this. So So the point is, if you just started making a project and it doesn't look good, that doesn't mean that it's bad. Sometimes you just have to put more effort into it, and oftentimes a lot of things I've found like don't even start to look that good until you get to, I'd say, like the 70% of the way mark. That's when like it starts to be like, okay, this actually looks good. But before that, you know, it's a shame if you just like give up on something before you're even like 30% of the way there because it doesn't look good yet. So yeah, kind of like think of your art like you're cooking some meat. This is a weird analogy, but you know, at first it's raw, but then you like marinate it, you season it, and then you cook it, and then it's just great after that. I can already hear all the comments of people saying, I want to eat your art. Tip number 6. So for making art in 3D, ultimately observational skills matter more than technical skills. Now, I'm not the most skilled person in the world in terms of like technical stuff, like the deep details of like how Blender works on a technical level, and making all of these like super complicated node setups and tools and stuff like that. I just know how to use Blender very efficiently, but I also have good artistic fundamentals, and that's the reason why my art looks better, is because I kind of just use Blender as a tool to make my high quality stuff. And I don't like overly think about, you know, things on a technical level, if that makes sense. So whether I'm making like an individual asset, a scene, environment, character, whatever, I just apply these artistic fundamentals to making it, and I just use Blender to do that. So the point I'm trying to make here is that when you start learning Blender, you're going to learn how to navigate around the software, how to use all of the tools very quickly. And then after that, the thing you're kind of going to spend the most time on is making your art look actually great and all of that. So tip number 7 is projects, and more projects. You just make projects, and that's kind of how you will improve. So making more projects is important because the more you make, the more different situations you're going to be exposed to. What I mean by that is, for example, if you were to make like an indoor scene versus an outdoor scene, you're going to kind of approach it slightly differently in certain areas. Like for example, on an indoor scene, you're going to be using things like ambient occlusion a lot more because the sun won't be like directly hitting. And, you know, for outdoor scenes, you have to make sure that the light isn't just like blasting everywhere into the viewer's eye, so that's important. You know, so what I'm trying to say is making different types of scenes, different types of animation is going to force you to grow more. Like if you make a scene with more interesting camera movement or more interesting animation, then that's going to push you and kind of like get you to the next level. Now, tip number 8 is stop not using references. So references and inspiration are absolutely essential if you want to make amazing stuff. For some reason, there's a lot of people you'll see like on Instagram or just like YouTube comments sometimes. There will be people with like barely any experience thinking that there's some sort of authority, and they'll say things like, oh, reference is bad. But that makes absolutely no sense. If references is so bad, then how come in a lot of animated films and movies, they actually will record the whole thing in live action pretty much so that they can have good reference for when they're animating and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure in Arcane they did this, for example. They recorded themselves in live action first before even making the film. So the reason why this is important is because references and inspiration gives you power, and it's what enables you to actually learn, if that makes sense. And then your job as an artist is to kind of like push or synthesize those references together to make something new. Now this applies to everything, not just animation. Like if you're making an environment or a character scene, you want to have inspiration from that, and you want to basically have what you're making and those inspiration images side by side so that you can compare back and see what it is that you have to push in your own work in order to make it better pretty much. Like here, for example, in this water animation, I took inspiration from the water in Spirited Away and used what I learned by observing that to help me make this. And for this pastel portrait, for example, I was looking at a lot of images of real faces with a similar type of makeup so that I could pull ideas from there and use that in my own work. So basically the point of this is that you need to take inspiration from the best possible places that you can find, because the better inspiration you look at, if that makes sense, it's going to make it so that you can make something that's even better, because you're getting inspired by something that's already really good. So, you know, you're going in that direction, if that makes sense. Alright, so tip number 9 is a little bit different, but basically everyone is constantly learning, and imposter syndrome is something that happens to almost everyone, I'd say. So let me tell you guys, I've been doing this for years, and no matter how much better I get, there's really just like an infinite amount of stuff to learn. The more you learn, the more you realize that there even is to be learned, if that makes sense. And that's just for art in general, not even just for learning Blender and stuff like that. There's just an infinite amount of stuff. So if you ever feel feelings like this, just know that it's normal and it's something that happens to a lot of people. With that being said though guys, there's a lot that I've learned over the years and a lot of mistakes that I could help you avoid. So if you're interested in fast tracking your learning to be able to make amazing stylized art like this, check out my masterclass on ukiyo-girls.io. Not only is it basically, you'll learn to make things like characters, environments, scenes, assets, all of this stuff, but also it's a community where you can share your work, ask for feedback, or ask for help as well, so this can just help you improve even faster. So definitely check it out if you're interested in that. Alright guys, thank you for watching and have a great day.